Great. So there are a few other webinars, most of them closer to the COVID time, pandemic time, but there are some webinars there. So we welcome you for participating. This is a good workshop on basics of MS4. I've seen Beth present it, and it was so good. We just thought it's good for anyone who's new to working in the MS4. It's good as an update, and she'll end by talking about where MS4 is heading, we think. And part of what we try to do is be a liaison to DEP for municipalities as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Beth. Thanks for Beth. I'll let you do your own introduction, but really glad to have Beth. Beth, by the way, is a member of our planning team. So we meet about 10 times a year and we plan activities like this. We talk about MS4 along with members of Stroud, Brandywine Conservancy, University of Delaware Water Resources Center. I'm from Brandywine Red Clay Alliance. We have the Chester County Conservation District. We have William Penn, or no, UPenn, White Clay Wild and Scenic, and Chester County Water Resource Authority. So well represented, and thank you, Beth, for leading this workshop.
No problem. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me. Yeah, like Brian mentioned, my name's Beth Euler. I'm the Pennsylvania Director at the Center for Watershed Protection. I've been in my current position for about 3.5 years. Before that, I was in the private sector doing a lot of MS4 work and stormwater work, in addition to wetland and stream work as well. And early in my career, I started at the Chester County Conservation District and was there for a few years, in the kind of on the government side of things. Now I'm one of the directors there, so that's fun. I still live in Chester County, so I am in fact a resident of this watershed. So it's kind of an area that's near and dear to my heart. Both grown up here and also still live here. Um, so today, like this is, going to be a very wide-ranging webinar in terms of, covering the very basics to really just set the stage and then growing to where our current program is, and then where, like Brian mentioned,
Oh my gosh, how cute. I need one.
is headed. Um, with the new permit. Well, they have released a draft. And one thing we do know is that regardless of what's in the new draft permit, intergovernmental collaboration is really key to stormwater management and addressing a lot of these MS4 requirements. And then I always include lists of resources and recommendations as links at the bottom. And so I'm sure Brian will either post a PDF of this presentation or share it via email afterwards so that you can have those links handy. This is just the fair warning that if you haven't been a part of this program at all yet, that it's one of our favorite acronym-laden programs. And so, this is kind of like a reference sheet here to show exactly all of the different acronyms that can be tossed around if you either see it like mentioned, or I try to say the full word out, but sometimes I accidentally shorten it. I know that when I've done uh, presentations at Board of Supervisors meetings or commissioners meetings or anything like that, they're always like, step back. What did you just say? What's PRP again? So it's important to try to say these in full, but this is just kind of your warning that there are a lot of acronyms in stormwater management, in the MS4 program, and specifically, I think DEP, Pennsylvania DEP likes to make up a lot of their own additional acronyms. So, starting at the very beginning, when it comes to watersheds and stormwater management, we have to just kind of center ourselves around what a watershed is and the importance of, what we do anywhere on the earth really is going to have a potential to impact the nearest surface water that it drains to, depending on timing and a lot of other considerations, whether stormwater is going to run off or not. So, uh, so just to kind of frame it, that's really a lot of what the permit program of the municipal separate storm sewer system, the MS4 permit program, is trying to address is water quality. And we have to really think about watersheds in order to understand water quality. And then this graphic, I kind of just like how it shows the different chunks of the major watersheds in Pennsylvania. Um, that star is really actually, sorry, Brian, that's left over from my presentation when we were in Malvern. But it's generally in the right spot for the Christina watershed as well.
After this,
If you
it's Christopher Valley
scooch
Council
over to the
reference
west
to the
tiny bit,
PSAMs. You should be all
but
good to go. I had
you're
you associate for
somebody's
uploading
unmuted.
information to the
Oh, I
signal.
don't think I have the
Any
ability to mute
questions or
them.
any issues, please give me a call.
Um,
470
so
7083.
So
Thank-
anyways, we're
Thank you.
located within the Christina watershed's located within the Delaware River watershed. And then in Pennsylvania we have really one, two, three, four, five. I think there's another little chunk somewhere I'm missing. No, maybe that's it. Oh, six additional watersheds. Um, and I like to show it because it's we hear a lot about the Chesapeake Bay and a lot of people that live, we hear about Chesapeake Bay so much actually that a lot of people that live in the Christina River Basin or the Brandywine River Basin or those that are composed of the smaller watersheds that comprise the Christina River Basin, think that we're part of the Chesapeake Bay, just because we hear so much about it and there's a lot of funding that support it, but we are not. We are located within the Delaware River watershed basin, which drains to the Delaware Bay ultimately, and the Susquehanna River watershed combined with the Potomac River watershed ultimately drain to the Chesapeake Bay. Um, and then, of course, we have the Ohio River watershed in the western part of the state. And then there's two small little chunks that drain to the Great Lakes, which I think everyone knows we have Lake Erie that borders Pennsylvania, but a lot of people don't realize there's a really small chunk that drain to Lake Ontario. So next, we talk about human activities impacting watersheds and water quality, but land use is one of the biggest impacts as well. And I'll talk about this because really a lot of what the MS4 permit tries to address is, former impacts due to land use that have already been kind of in place. So land use can increase stormwater runoff, can cause loss of habitat, increased erosion due to the increased stormwater runoff, more pollutants due to more people, increase in water temperature due to the impervious surface tends to be hotter than natural ground cover. And then again, like tied to habitat, loss of food sources, and changes in aquatic species. So, stormwater runoff. What is stormwater runoff? It's water that from rain or melting snow. Some people don't realize that melting snow is technically considered stormwater that runs off across the land. And it occurs when stormwater can't infiltrate or evapotranspirate. And so there is a certain amount of stormwater that will run off of natural ground. But when we have impervious surfaces like houses and pavement, parking, anything like that, then we have a lot more running off, right? The stormwater runoff typically will flow into the nearest stream, creek, river, lake, or ocean, but it's going to go into a storm sewer system first in some cases. In our more rural areas, we might not actually have underground pipes. We might have, roadside ditches or roadside swales that carry it to the systems, to the hydrologic systems. And it carries pollutants and causes pollution, or it can carry pollutants and cause pollution. So as mentioned, it's not only affected by land cover, but it's affected by slope. So the flatter that a surface is, the more the stormwater is going to infiltrate into the ground and not run off. The steeper it is, the more we're going to have stormwater running off. Soil type's a big factor. So we have some soils that naturally promote infiltration and accept more water, and some soils that are just really dense and have more clay possibly in it, and don't allow for infiltration, so cause more stormwater to run off. The intensity and duration of storm events also affect how much stormwater is going to run off. We have other factors now, like climate change, that we are considering for stormwater runoff in terms of future storm events, and then also, now we're definitely uh, experiencing more intense and frequent storm events. And then population, because with population, we also have higher densities of land cover of impervious surfaces, and also different human activities that can cause water quality issues. So I've kind of jumbled up two main concepts when it comes to stormwater runoff and surface water, is water quality and water quantity. And these two things are really closely tied. I would say the base of the MS4 program kind of is really trying to get at water quality issues. However, when we have lots of impervious surface and no stormwater management controls to manage that impervious surface, so the stormwater runoff for that from that impervious surface, and release it slowly into our streams, that causes a water quantity issue. So excessive stormwater runoff can cause flooding, and in turn, that flooding causes stream erosion, and that stream erosion, the sediment that's coming off of the stream banks is actually a big source of pollution when it comes to um, urban environments. And so that's why we're kind of jumbling the two together a little bit, because we as people in this discipline, the regulators, we like to look at water quality and water quantity as really two separate buckets, but they are very closely intertwined. And I wanted to show an example of how much land cover really does impact stormwater runoff. And this particular slide is great. I think I want to say, I think it's from like NRCS manual, but it's still really, is one of those diagrams that doesn't age because it's an older diagram. But when we have a storm event, we have about, this is just like conceptually, about 40% of that in a pre-development condition with no impervious surface is evapotranspirating through existing vegetation. And then we have about 50% of it infiltrating into the ground. And, that 25% is really replenishing our aquifers, our groundwater recharge. And only 10% is running off into the streams. And when you look at a watershed or an area that is 75 to 100% impervious cover, these numbers drastically change. And we, have the evapotranspiration reducing from 40% to 30%. The infiltration is reducing from a total to 50 to 15. And then we have the runoff increasing from 10 to 55%. And so that's just going to show you how much this is a big factor in, in stormwater management. So the more development we have, the more potential impact we have to water quantity, so more running off, but also water quality, because that runoff is causing stream bank erosion, which is sediment entering our streams, and then also there's nutrients and other pollutants that attach to that sediment. So some examples of stormwater pollutants. We talked a lot about sediment already. Things like trash and debris, bacteria, pesticides, fertilizers, nutrients, which are in fertilizers, oil and grease. We have like road salts, and temperature, which is something that people don't think about as a pollutant, but it is. And then these pollutants cause things like fish kills, eroding streams, loss of land, biodiversity. That loss of land and eroding streams can cause property infrastructure damage. If you think about water quantity, that could be from flooding as well. We're not talking about beach closures necessarily in Chester County, but We certainly like to visit the beach, and when we have bacteria issues at certain beaches, they can be closed to the public and other potential pollutants. We have sewer leaks, algal blooms, and also potentially contaminated drinking water sources, which costs more than to um, potentially treat as a result of stormwater runoff pollutants. So, all of that background, there are many different types of National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System programs. And some of them are to offset direct pollutant discharges into streams or to address that or manage that. Like things like industrial discharges or wastewater discharges. We have an NPDES permit to manage construction site discharges in Pennsylvania. Um, it's for sites that are greater than an acre of earth disturbance, and it's designed to minimize the amount of sediment leaving active construction sites, and then require stormwater management post-construction and long term. This National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Permit Program is called the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, and it's for municipalities and then other state or federally owned non-municipal entities. There's a handful of them that um, have to manage the runoff from the outfalls that discharge from the land that they own. So in Pennsylvania municipalities, for the most part, we're talking about municipally owned roadway and where the discharges enter the streams from the municipally owned roadway. And any other property that a municipality may own, like a public works facility or something like that. So this, the goals of the program is to recognize and increase awareness of stormwater as a point source pollutant. So I mentioned the term outfall. That's the point at which it discharges into our streams. Some of the pollutants that we're talking about are, they're not coming from a factory, where we know exactly where it's coming from. If we have somebody using pesticides widespread over a large area, that's more of a non-point source pollutant, but it's going into sometimes our outfalls and discharging as a point source. So this is what this permit is regulating stormwater from municipally owned facilities as a point source. And just like any other point source pollutant, like I mentioned, like a factory, industrial, or wastewater. So this is a federal permit program, and the Environmental Protection Agency is kind of the enforcing agency behind it. And then many states are developing their own permit programs to comply with the Code of Federal Regulations. So every state has this permit program. In Pennsylvania, the DEP is the entity responsible for administering it. So they have a permit that's developed for consistency with that. Generally, there's a lot of similarities between permit programs and the basic permit programs from state to state. But there are some differences as well. So obviously we're focusing on Pennsylvania here, but this then trickles down to the municipality who has the permit as a requirement, and then municipality has to ensure that the residents and people doing business within the boundaries of the municipality are complying with those regulations by enacting ordinances and things of that nature and doing a public outreach, so that the municipality can show that they're complying with this permit program. So what is an MS4? Because you say something enough, it just doesn't really connect sometimes, but it's called a municipal separate storm sewer system. So what that means is it's owned by state, city, town, village, or other public entity. That's the federal definition. So in Pennsylvania, our municipalities are really, boroughs, townships of the first class, second class, and cities. And then there's also some non-municipal MS4 permittees like state-funded universities, some state prisons, and military bases, and PennDOT and the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission and things like that. But for the vast majority, it's municipalities. And It's not a combined sewer. It's a separate storm sewer. So I'll show what the difference is in a second. And it collects or conveys stormwater through pipes, drains, ditches, etc. So it's just surface water going into the storm sewer system and running off of our roadways. This is the difference between combined sewer and separate storm sewer. We also have separate sanitary sewer systems that are supposed to be closed systems, so no stormwater is getting into them. And the wastewater treatment plant operators and owners don't want any stormwater getting into their systems because then they're treating clean water, and that's a waste of money. We don't want any wastewater getting into our systems because it's discharging directly into the streams, and that's causing a water quality issue. But we have a lot of historic development in some parts of the state and the country where they have combined sewer. And, Philadelphia is an example of that. City of Lancaster is an example. And this is intentionally designed where sanitary sewer flows through a pipe system that also accepts stormwater runoff. And generally speaking, it all goes to the wastewater treatment plant. But when they have a really significant storm event, the wastewater treatment plant can't handle all of that, and it overflows into the stream, this mixture of wastewater and stormwater. So this permit program that we're talking about, and every MS4 in Chester County, every municipality in Chester County has municipal separate storm sewer systems. And that's where we have our sanitary systems completely separate, our wastewater systems, and from the stormwater systems. And so we're looking at this here, so we don't have to deal with this kind of combined source system over here. Why is it important? Well, there's a lot of reasons. We need to protect water quality for just overall ecological health, for recreational benefits, to have the swimmable, fishable, drinkable waters. The more, a lot of drinking water sources are from surface waters. So, the cost of treating that water, the more polluted it is, higher. That directly impacts the ratepayers as well. So there's a lot of reasons why it's important, and this permit program contributes to those reasons. So municipalities complying with it can help really the overall benefit of our water quality and ecological health, again, for swimmable, fishable, drinkable waters. Obviously, nobody's drinking right out of a river, but you know what I mean. This is a list of stormwater regulations over time in Pennsylvania. It's a mixture of federal and state. And really, the thing I wanted to highlight here is that in 2003 is really where the vast majority of municipalities got the MS4 permit requirement as a result of this phase 2 stormwater rule that was enacted in 1999. And so this was a federal rule, but it was, basically a modification of the Clean Water Act. So these new MS4 permits cover small municipalities as opposed to the large municipalities, which were phase 1. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here. Large and medium MS4s are those municipalities that have municipal separate storm sewer systems that serve populations of those numbers. So over 250,000 and between 100,000 and 250,000 for medium. So in Pennsylvania, that's just 2. We have the city of Allentown, which is a medium, and the city of Philadelphia, which is a large. Everybody else is considered a small MS4 in Pennsylvania. And so you would think that Pittsburgh has a very high population. Why don't they have a permit or are covered under a large or medium? And that's because they have so much combined sewer that they actually, the population that's served by a separate storm sewer actually falls under the small MS4. This is just a map of the regulated MS4s, just to give an idea. People were always like, well, why do we have this requirement? Why didn't anybody else have the requirement? Well, this is a nationwide permit. Now, this map is a little old. EPA hasn't updated it in a while. But when you look at it, it doesn't really support my argument that a lot of people have this requirement. But when you try to understand the impetus behind it. It's really to offset human impacts and, the correlation of impervious cover with the amount of people that live somewhere. And so when you look at this map, that green box is really the takeaway, is that the regulated area represents only 4% of the land area of the US, the contiguous US, but it's over 80% of the population. So it does impact a lot of people, even if it doesn't look like it does, land area wise. And then similarly in Pennsylvania, this is what we're looking at. We have over 1,000 phase two small MS4 permittees. So that's about 40% of the municipalities in the state. So it does impact a lot of municipalities, and it is really concentrated on urban areas. And so that's why Chester County and the Christina watershed has a lot of regulated municipalities because of the fact that we're so close to Philadelphia, that we're located within the U.S. Census designated urban area associated with Philadelphia. And I do need to update this because now the draft 2026 Pennsylvania Integrated Water Quality Report is out. But this is where we can look at where Pennsylvania's surface water impairments are. And when you start looking around, you can get all sorts of different information out of it, including the leading causes of stream impairments in Pennsylvania. The biggest takeaway, the leading sources of stream impairments in Pennsylvania. So that's a big key thing here. We have a lot of source unknown, so I can't really explain that. But the fourth leading cause is urban runoff / storm sewers, and that's not the only source that's related to population or development. Habitat modification, highway, road, bridge runoff, all of those also are related. And so our streams are not achieving their water quality designated uses, and they're considered impaired. And there's a big reason is because of these urban sources. And I also just wanted to share that the leading cause of impairment of streams in Pennsylvania is siltation. And by far, as far as the source of siltation from urban environments, it's unmanaged stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces eroding our streams. And so, there's been pieces of this permit program that have been developed to address that. So this is just like a glimpse of our current permit program. There's 6 minimum control measures: public education and outreach, public involvement participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site runoff control, post-construction site runoff, and then pollution prevention, good housekeeping. We also have pollutant reduction plans, TMDL plans. These are to reduce sediment and nutrients to streams that are impaired or have a TMDL for these impairments. And then we have pollutant control measures for stormwater discharges to streams impaired for acid mine drainage, PCBs, or pathogens. And then we have an annual report requirement that's required to be submitted by September 30th of every year for an entity that has an MS4 permit. So when the permit first started, we had 10 years. It's a 5-year permit cycle, and it was extended for 5 years. And it was just the minimal control measures to start. And then we had the total maximum daily load requirements that were added in the second permit round, and the Chesapeake Bay TMDL pollutant reduction requirements. There wasn't super concrete guidance on methodologies and objectives associated with these, so we didn't have a lot of these plans approved, and a lot of municipalities moving forward with implementation. These are projects in the ground to reduce sediment and nutrients, like basin retrofits, stream restorations or floodplain restorations, and things like that. So in permit round 3, which is where we are currently, now administratively extended for 3 additional years, DEP clarified the TMDL requirements and the pollutant reduction plan requirements, and then added these pollutant control measures, which is more of a research and enforcement exercise. So just to go through these real quick, because um, you'd want to look at these probably in more detail in the permit, but the first minimum control measure is public education and outreach. There's requirements to have a written program for all of these minimum control measures and review them and update it as need be. There's requirements for publishing at least one educational item per year. A lot of people use their website and or a newsletter as far as that's concerned. And DEP really checks all the links in the website when you have an inspection to make sure that they're functioning. They also have to distribute educational materials through 2 methods per year, and there's a different things listed there. Then there's also public involvement and participation. Um, this also requires a written program, opportunities for the public to participate in decision-making processes, encouraging municipalities to partner with other entities. The first 2 minimum control measures is really where Christina Watershed's municipal partnership really helps municipalities achieve their permit objectives. And so if you're not taking full advantage of the website or didn't participate in the webinar earlier, I encourage you to do so. And it's really all of the materials there for you. All you have to do is grab it, put it on your municipal Facebook page, your website, your newsletter, print them out and hand them out at an event. Just make sure you document all of that for your annual report. The MCM3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination, and this is where we're required to map the storm sewer system, know where the outfalls are where the storm sewer system discharges to the streams, and then screen the outfalls periodically. So for existing permittees, once per permit term, so once every 5 years, to go through that outfall screening process to identify whether there are any potential pollutants from those outfalls. You have to have an ordinance that prohibit those non-stormwater discharges into the MS4 and do education and outreach specific to IDD&E, or illicit discharge detection and elimination. So making sure that the public knows what illicit discharges are, that it's pollution, that it's bad, that they need to contact the municipality if they suspect anything, and you need to have how they can contact you and report an illicit discharge on your website, loud and clear, outside of business hours, and also that if it's an emergency, that DEP should be contacted if there's like an immediate threat to human health or the environment. So this is just an example. A lot of municipalities have ArcGIS digital mapping of their storm sewer systems. And if you do, you might as well have it on ArcGIS online and have it accessible to your public works staff, your administrative staff, so that you can better, quickly, more identify where the source of an illicit discharge is, if you note one, by following it upstream, or also, it's a helpful tool for asset management and maintenance purposes. So just wanted to highlight that real quickly. Minimum control measure 4 is construction site runoff control. And that's where basically the statewide permit covers this minimum control measure. And I'm not going to cover it any more than that, other than that you need to notify the conservation district if you do have a land development that comes in over an acre of earth disturbance, just to make sure that they get their NPDES permit for construction. Similarly, a lot of that same process handles minimum control measure 5. But the biggest thing to note here is that you have to have an ordinance that requires operations and maintenance of post-construction stormwater management BMPs for the long term. And then you have to make sure that the responsible party is actually doing the maintenance for those privately owned best management practices like basins and things of that nature. That's the written, or that's the gist of that BMP. So this is an example of one of the BMP inspection programs. DEP doesn't really tell you how you are supposed to enforce and ensure that BMPs are being properly maintained in the permit, but there are a lot of different ways to achieve that goal, and this is just one example. So minimum control measure 6 is pollution prevention, good housekeeping. This is really all your public works staff and facilities, and ensuring that you're not actually actively contributing pollution as a result of your operations and activities as a municipal government. So you have to have a written operations and maintenance program and an inventory of all of your municipally owned facilities and activities that could potentially cause pollution. So, making sure that you understand your road salt management, how you're doing that, um, oil changes, where the spent oil goes, that we don't have people just dumping spent oil down storm drains, that we know where your storm drains at your public works facility, where they go, so that if you're washing vehicles off, they're not just running right off into the storm sewer system and into the stream. You're also required to have an employee training program and do employee training annually. And this is another thing that CWMP helps with. And this webinar would certainly be something you could report in your annual report as to what staff participated and received this type of training. This is just a high level look at what pollutant control measures look like. This is a research and enforcement exercise, like I mentioned. So you have to basically identify any outfalls that discharge to streams that have these impairments, delineate the areas that drain to it, look to see whether there's any potential causes of those impairments in the drainage areas to it, which is the source inventory. And if there are, then you need to investigate it further, which would be like sampling during wet or dry weather, and then reporting the results to DEP. In the case of pathogens, if there is an issue, then DEP is going to want to see an animal waste ordinance enacted for public properties. And then that being said, there may be some further action that DEP will take. I mentioned pollutant reduction plans and total maximum daily load plans. That's really where municipalities have the biggest expense when it comes to the MS4 program. The minimum control measures kind of are looked at a little bit more as a documentation process, but really there's an opportunity to really engage your communities with those minimum control measures. But these are where projects are being put into the ground, like basin retrofits, bioretention, stream restoration, possibly things like street sweeping this current permit term. The goal for this, if you have this requirement, not every municipality does, it depends on where your streams discharge. You had to reduce sediment by 10% over a 5-year period during this permit term through the implementation of a combination of those types of projects. And there was a significant analysis that was needed to occur as part of that. So overall, what is the objective of these things? It's to restore the waters. And so I showed the integrated water quality report earlier, and that's showing what streams are impaired and what streams are not impaired, what streams are currently achieving their water quality objectives because they haven't been impacted as much, and what aren't. So if you have any of those pollutant control measure, pollutant reduction plan, or TMDL requirements, then those streams aren't achieving their goals. And the goal is to implement projects so that eventually we can get to the point where they're no longer impaired. Something also to be aware of is that DEP conducts inspections periodically, and EPA conducts audits of municipalities' MS4 permit programs. Okay, and right now DEP is in the process of finishing their inspections for this round in the Southeast region. They will contact you and basically coordinate a date, review all of your information. The more information you have on your website available, like annual reports, mapping, things like that, the easier the process is, because they'll review all of that ahead of time and won't have to ask you as many questions at the meeting. But they'll allow like a 2-hour slot for this. And so I would imagine a lot of municipalities have already that are sitting in this webinar have already gone through that. There may be some that are still waiting for DEP's inspection. They will also want to do a walkthrough of the public works facility, and they'll also want to see a completed pollutant reduction plan or TMDL plan project that has been implemented, if you have one that's been implemented. Or, potentially they might even just go look at a site where one has been proposed if you haven't implemented one yet. So, they're looking for clean workspaces in the public works facility, labeled chemicals and containers, signage, preparedness for spills, like spill kits everywhere, and just generally making sure that you're documenting things. And so, DEP approaches this that they're here to be, I don't want to say they're here to be your friend, but they're not here to get you. They want to work with you. They want to make sure you're prepared. And it's not necessarily something to be intimidated by. um, Showing that you're working towards compliance goes a long way. If anyone is interested in where you can find your current MS4 permit requirements, there is a table called, I think it's called the MS4 requirements table that's located on DEP's website. And so I was mentioning, you may not have a pollutant reduction plan requirement, or you may not have a TMDL requirement. First of all, if your municipality is located within the Christina River Basin in Chester County, you're highly likely to have the TMDL because the Christina River Basin has a TMDL for sediment and nutrients. TMDLs for sediment and nutrients. There are a few exceptions, but if you're outside of the Christina River Basin, you might not have that TMDL requirement. There are very few municipalities that don't have a pollutant reduction plan requirement at all, I think, in Chester County. And I want to say there's a couple that come to mind, but this is just a snapshot of what it looks like. So Appendix C is the pollutant control measure requirement, and as well as Appendix B. And then Appendix E is your pollutant reduction plan. And if you have a TMDL, it'll show up as TMDL, like down here in Franklin and Honeybrook. So that's just an FYI. We're nearing the end of that permit term now, but I thought if you're new to this, that's where DEP lists everything. They used to have a really cool map that showed everything spatially, but that is not working on the website anymore. Probably the only person that actively looks at that map. So they're not fixing it, and I've told them that it's not working. Okay, so the next, I'm sorry, when you finish presenting, can you repeat the website requirement? I believe you mentioned one needs to be entered information. Please confirm. Okay. Sorry, I just got distracted and decided to answer that right away. The website requirement, are you talking about illicit discharges? Because that's like the biggest website requirement on your stormwater page, is making sure that people know how to contact the municipality for illicit discharges. And DEP wants to see that, not just call the township building because, township office, because you have limited office hours, right? You may only be open from 8 to 4 or 8 to 5. So you need to have some sort of way that people can contact the municipality outside of business hours. And that may be the non-emergency police phone number or something like that. Or maybe there's a reporting form that you use. So as long as you have something like that, that should suffice. But you also want to have educational information there on what an illicit discharge is, so they know what to report. But that should be on the stormwater page on your website. It doesn't explicitly say that you need to have a stormwater page on your website in the permit, but most municipalities do, because it's a really easy way to check the box for one of those requirements. Okay, so the next permit cycle, we'll talk about this really briefly because I'm going over on time. I realized I got really caught up in the background stuff. Sorry, everybody. The next permit cycle, we're just waiting for it to start, right? So DEP started getting input on the current permit cycle for the future permit cycle back in 2022, and it's 2026 now, and we still don't have a new permit yet. So we're waiting on that. That general permit that I mentioned expired on March 15th, 2023. And then we had the draft new permit released in January 2025. and it went through a public comment period, and we're still waiting on DEP to finish addressing those public comments, roll out the rest of the tools. They're going to have some recorded trainings on their Clean Water Academy and things like that. The current permit says that the notices of intent are due September 30th, 2026. At this point, there's no way that that's going to stay in place, so it's going to be pushed back to at least September 30th, 2027. Note, this is for general permittees. So if you're a municipality that has an individual permit, you're going to be operating on a different timeline. So it's important to know which one you have. The vast majority of municipalities, I believe, in Chester County, I don't know if it's vast majority, but definitely majority, are individual permits, because individual permits either discharge to TMDL streams or streams that are designated as exceptional value or high quality. And there's a couple other reasons why you might have an individual permit, but that's the main reason. So anyways, if you can see whether you have an individual permit even on this requirements table, that NPDES ID number. If you have a PAI, that's individual. If you have a PAG, so Franklin, that's general. That being said, this isn't like the best way to look at NPDES permit numbers. There's another one that I probably have listed somewhere later that I would recommend. Anyway, so the biggest thing is the DP is going to still be trying to address pollutant reduction, water quality, like the pollutant reduction plans. But instead of using sediment and nutrients as a measurement to achieving that water quality, they're going to be looking at runoff volume reduction as a means of reducing sediment and nutrients. And that's because of what we've been talking about unmanaged stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces causing that stream erosion. The volume, controlling volume and managing it is actually going to be reducing the amount of sediment and nutrients that enter our streams through that stream bank erosion. And so that's what DEP is focusing on in this draft permit, and that was from feedback from that work group. It's going to help to be more consistent with the other NPDES permit programs that DEP manages, like the construction site runoff permit. And in addition, they're going to have some socioeconomic factors that are going to be considered when determining requirements. There's a lot of feedback saying we need more planning time in order to implement these big projects and identify locations for these big projects. And so that's trying to be, they've tried to incorporate that. And then they wanted to standardize reduction requirement calculations so that everyone's kind of using the same approaches, and then also facilitates collaboration so that everybody's using the same methodologies. And then finally, they're going to incentivize collaboration between municipalities, because we all know there's benefits of collaboration, but there's a perceived regulatory risk and the effort behind it. So people just go at it solo, even though it may be more cost effective to team with other communities. So DEP's looked at incentivizing that by actually reducing requirements for those municipalities that do collaborate for this current permit term. So high level summary, the biggest change in the new permit is the shift from from sediment reduction to volume management in order to achieve the same goal of water quality improvement. There's also a new model ordinance that's quite lengthy, and it's going to be consistent with the new post-construction stormwater management manual that's coming out. And we're also shifting from best management practice when we're describing facilities like stormwater basins and bioretention to stormwater control measures, SCMs, so BMP to SCM. So high level, there's some minimum changes to the minimum control measures, but they're going to require what's called a maximum extent practicable calculator be completed to establish an annual volume management objective. And then 2 years later, submitting a volume management plan that shows how you're going to achieve that volume management objective. And then they're going to be looking for implementation in the last 2 years of the permit term. So that's extremely high level. And if you have any detailed questions on that, we can talk about it further. I mentioned collaboration and how it's going to be incentivized in the next permit. not just, we know that collaboration can have its benefits. There are a lot of existing collaborations throughout the state that are good models for working together. And so the Center for Watershed Protection created an inventory of these groups, and there's a lot of information on them. If you're interested, you can see the Christina Watersheds Municipal Partnership is on here, and it's mainly for the public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, and employee training aspects. But when it comes to implementation, there are some groups that are doing that type of thing as well. So I encourage you to look at this resource and look at the DEP page if you want to get some more information. This is just a high level look at some of the information that is available in the toolkit. There's case studies on each of those collaborations that I mentioned, and then also, this is really hard to look at on this screen. Apologize for that, but lots of lists of resources, both for the new permit here that I talked about. DEP also has a more a detailed draft permit presentation on the Clean Water Academy, and that's linked there as well. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen a presentation on it at all. Everybody always talks about funding sources. This is just a high level list of funding sources, and I listed some information on stormwater fees and authorities. Unfortunately, now since the court case with Westchester Borough and the Pennsylvania State Higher Education System, I think I said that acronym reversed, but has been decided. There's a lot more questions than answers that we had hoped that we'd have. And so, I think municipalities are still trying to sort through how to proceed with that, if they were interested in having a fee or if they already have a fee and what to do. So just high level tips moving forward. Always designate staff for specific activities. So this is the permit program that requires input from your potentially receptionist, your manager, your public works staff, your public works director, possibly codes. A lot of people need to be communicating in order to provide documentation to the person who's doing your annual report. Maybe a consultant, you may need information from municipal engineer. It may not be the same person. So make sure you know who does what and that everybody's communicating. Always document activities. If you're doing any kind of inspection, take pictures. Take pictures of it. And if it's a routine inspection that's going to be repeated over and over again, take photographs of the same thing from the same location, from the same angle, so that you can track potential issues over time. Consider collaboration. Again, this is something that's going to help everyone achieve their goals more cost effectively. And, for Christina Watershed Municipal Partnership is one way of doing that. Constantly, people are assessing their funding sources and where funding is going to come from to either implement the baseline program for minimum control measures for public education and outreach, to ordinance updates, to implementation of a pollutant reduction plan. So moving forward, recommend that you still look at the draft permit documents, even though the public comment period's already closed. It's a good idea to get ahead of it. There's some changes that are probably going to occur as a result of the public comments, but a lot of it will be remaining the same. And so, get ahead of it. Also, if you have any comments, DP is still accepting comments, like kind of informally. So they have a resource email account that's listed on the MS4 website, and you can shoot them an email and they will, certainly consider that. When it comes to addressing water quality improvements and reducing sediment and nutrients to streams that are impaired, shift your mindset and messaging from sediment reduction to volume reduction, and start communicating that, to potentially even your boards and councils, so that they know what's coming. Consider different stormwater control measure types for future implementation. And so that might change a little bit. We're not getting as much credit for things like that are targeted at um, that don't actually manage volume. So like street sweeping and stream restoration that does not have a volume component to it, like floodplain restoration component. So if you're doing those now, you might want to consider, say if you're doing a stream restoration, if you have the space for it, maybe you can add a floodplain restoration component, or something to that nature. And then finally, can't say it enough, promote collaboration, start talking to your neighbors, start talking to entities, that um, that could potentially facilitate that collaboration around volume management plans and implementing them. And that's all I had. That doesn't leave very much time for questions, but happy to take them.
Great. Thank you, Beth. There's one in there from Ted at Kennett Township.
Oh, I knew I was going to get one from Ted. I don't know. I don't know, Ted. When will DEP release responses to the comments provided to the updated draft permit? So, you know, my this is just my opinion. I think that they're probably going to just release release the final permit and the comments and responses at the same time. I'm having deja vu here. I feel like me and Ted have talked about this. Um, and they're saying that it's not going to be until 2027 at the earliest. And they also want to have the post-construction stormwater management manual released around the same time because there's a lot of cross references going on. So so yeah, I would say they're saying not until at least 2027. Some people may have interpreted some of what DEP said as yes, it will be released in 2027, but I don't know. I don't know when it'll be, when exactly, but that's what Sean Furjanik has said in different meetings, and some other DEP central office staff. I don't think that they're going to be going through another public comment period or anything. Um, but I don't know either. So
Any
Ted's
other
probably like,
questions?
and if there's anything like in particular that anyone wants to know in more detail, feel free to follow up and reach out to me separately. Be happy to answer.
Great, Beth. So you said you would share the PDF with me that I can share with people?
Sure.
Great. Okay. I'll send it out in a day or two. And then we'll post the YouTube. Any other questions, anybody? Thanks for spending your lunchtime with us. Beth, I thought that was an awesome presentation. Really appreciate all your experience and knowledge on this topic.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me again.
Great. Well, with that, I'm going to end the workshop, the webinar. Thank you, Beth. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Stay cool and safe. Next storm's coming. And we'll see you at the next event. Thank you so much.